Chapter 5. Starry Night is one of Van Gogh's premier works, Dante said as he stood at Eve's side on Saturday afternoon in the museum. How do you know that? She asked, wondering how he would know such a thing. That's what it says in this little brochure thingy. He held out the off-white paper as if reluctant to show her he was cheating. Oh, she smiled at his attempt to sound like he knew something about art. What else does it say? Let's see. He painted 2,200 works, including several that he copied from previous artists. And he cut off his own ear. Now, that one I knew. Dante looked at her with disgust. Why would somebody cut off their own ear? Ouch! Eve shrugged. Maybe he was tired of listening to Mrs. Van Gogh. He started to laugh, but seriousness crossed his face first. I think he was just crazy. Yeah, she said, the joke gone. Probably. So, who's your favorite artist? He asked as they drifted over to the next painting. Tall and dark, from hair to features, Dante was plenty nice looking, but he always seemed to be tiptoeing around her, and after months of that, it was getting old. Artist? I don't really have one. My favorite designer is Nicole Miller. Designer of what? Clothes, she said, as though that should be obvious. I love the lines she's done. Sleek, but fun. Slowly Dante shook his head, and a forced smile came to his face. I don't really know much about designers. I'm just lucky to not clash when I get dressed. She laughed. You sound like Dustin. As soon as the name was out of her mouth, she wished she could take it back. Dante's reaction, coupled with hers, said saying that name was the wrong thing to do. However, it was too late, so she plunged ahead in a futile attempt to salvage the mistake. He didn't know satin from rayon. Give him cotton, and he was happy. Dante's side of the conversation evaporated as they walked slowly to the next painting. He looked down at the brochure, and then up at the painting. This is one of Van Gogh's early works. Presumably before he cut his ear off, Eve said, fighting desperately to turn back time and do the last few minutes over again. Yeah, he said uncertainly. Presumably. He was trying so hard, Eve thought when she looked at him. He wanted this to work so badly, but as much as he wanted it to, it just wasn't. Do you really want to see the rest of the exhibits? She asked, hoping he would take the gentle hint and agree to stop the charade. When he looked at her, it was with a mix of confusion and sincere effort. Yeah, I think we should, since we're here. Since we're here. It was the worst reason for doing anything she'd ever heard. Pulling determination to her, she smiled. Well, then let's see what they say about this next one. Okay, that's it, Melody said, ripping the headphones off of AJ's ears before he even knew she was in the garage. For a single moment, the drum beat continued to transfer from his ears to his hand before he realized the beat in his ears was gone. Mel, what? He reached over in dazed confusion and hit the stop button with his stick. I didn't know you were coming. Sneak attack, Melody corkscrewed her mouth and narrowed her gaze at him. I can see that, he said as she reached around him and hit the power button. You're going to turn into a drum if you're not careful. Now, come on. She grabbed his hand and yanked with all of her blonde might. Grudgingly, he allowed himself to be pulled up. Can I ask where we're going? Farron is meeting us in an hour. Farron? He asked as she pulled the tarp out of the storage bin. Who's Farron? A girl from work. I met her last week, and she's perfect for you. He exhaled in frustration. Mel. No, this one isn't like the others. She's really cool, and she's really cute, and I told her I would bring you. This was getting worse, and he closed his eyes. Haven't we had this conversation already? Yes, we have, and if you would just be a little more cooperative, maybe we could stop having it. Melody threw half of the tarp to him. Now cover that thing up, and let's go. But I'm not even dressed. That's why we're going to have to hurry. As slowly as possible, AJ helped her cover the drum set. Would it matter if I said I didn't want to go? No. I didn't think so. Come on. I know what you can wear, so Farron will fall head over heels for you. Melody grabbed his hand and pulled his reluctant body from the garage. You know that nice shirt I gave you for your birthday last year? The one that feels like a wool sack? They trekked through the living room and to the stairs. Going out? His mother asked from her perch on the recliner. Yes, Melody said, just as he said, no. Melody yanked him in front of her and pushed him up the steps to his room. Once there, he sat down on the bed and watched her scour through his closet. See, this shirt, she said, pulling the light purple pressed button-down shirt out. And these pants, black Dockers. And this belt, thin black with a gold buckle. And, oh yeah, here it is. His world spun when she pulled the next item out. A tie? Mel. Yes, a tie. Farron likes ties. Just my luck. Here, Melody thrust the clothes at him and pulled him up from the bed. Now, get in there and get beautiful. His feet dragged across the floor. Oh, she said just as he got to the door. And do something with your hair. Mousse it or gel it or something. And no baseball cap. No baseball cap? With no energy whatsoever, AJ closed the door on her instructions. Why couldn't he just have a peaceful night at home with the rock music blowing his brains out? Why was that so much to ask? Some type of fast food would have been fine with Eve. At least then they wouldn't have had to endure hours of forced conversation. However, Dante had no intention of taking somebody like her to anything but the best, which meant they ended up at a French restaurant staring at menus listing things she couldn't pronounce and prices she knew he couldn't afford. Really, we could go somewhere else, she whispered, using her menu as a screen from the rest of the restaurant. Don't be silly, Dante said, although the tinge of white circling his face told her he was lying with each word. Go ahead, order whatever you want. She wanted to argue, but that did no good with Dante. She had learned that much. He was being nice, and she couldn't be mean to someone who was trying so hard. With no other options, she ordered the cheapest salad on the menu when the waiter arrived. You don't want an entree? Dante asked in puzzled concern. I'm not all that hungry, Eve said, smiling as she handed the menu to the waiter. Oh, Dante ordered quickly, and the waiter left. An incessant, gloomy silence settled over their table as they both fought to come up with something to say. So, what? He smiled uncertainly as their words collided awkwardly. Sorry, you first. Oh, I was just going to ask what else you do for fun, she said. For fun? Bit by bit, awkward dropped away from him, and he slid an arm over the back of his chair casually. Well, I like to watch racing. Like what kind? Drag racing, mostly, but stock car is cool, too. Oh, she said, trying to get interested into that sound. That's cool. You ever been to a race? A couple. They were pretty cool, all the crashes and stuff. She nodded, searching the files of her brain for any information she had on stock car racing. The more she searched, the less she found. I like movies, too, he offered. Oh, really? What kind? She asked, pouncing on that topic. Finally, they had hit on something they could talk about. Action, Dante said, nodding. But I really like the sci-fi stuff. Star Trek, Aliens. Star Wars, Eve added, because that was the only one she knew. His face scrunched incredulously. Star Wars? No, I mean real science fiction. She wanted to ask why Star Wars didn't qualify as science fiction, or what made the others better, but from his tone, she knew he didn't think Star Wars was even worthy of discussion. So, how about you? He asked, leaning onto the table and staring at her with that intent look that scattered her nerves. What kind of movies do you like? Chick flicks mostly, she said, fighting like mad to squelch the sigh. Action's okay, sci-fi is all right if that's the only thing available, but no horror. No way. I hate horror movies. Fire lit into his eyes. Ooh, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The all-time great movie. Eve pushed her revulsion under her need to appear interested. I've never seen it. Oh, man. Then we're going to have to rent it some night. It's unbelievable. Good word, Eve thought. For the date, as much as for the movie. You're going to have to come over some night, he continued, getting more excited about the idea the longer he talked. We can rent movies and order in. It'll be great. Thankfully, the waiter picked that moment to arrive with dinner. Agreeing would have been the biggest lie of her life. Your tie's crooked, Melody said as they stood in the line to get into the bar Houston. It's too tight, AJ said, yanking at it. It's crooked. Exasperated, Melody reached over, straightened it, and then cinched it tighter for good measure. When he reached for it, she glared at him. Don't touch it. It's perfect. No, perfect would have been being home in front of a television or banging on his drums. This was not perfect. At the door, they showed their IDs and entered the smoke and lights. I told her to be by the dance floor, Melody said as she grabbed his hand, presumably so he couldn't get away. 10 deep into the crowd, Melody spotted Farron, and without warning, he was suddenly being dragged past, over, and right through people. Sorry, excuse me, he said, fighting to keep his balance. In the next heartbeat, Melody stopped, and AJ's momentum just about carried him right into her. Farron! Melody squealed as the small girl in the tight leather pants squealed in the same pitch when she saw them. AJ narrowed his eyes to ward off the sound. I thought you were never going to get here, Farron gushed, hugging Melody as though they hadn't seen each other in years. Then Farron glanced at AJ and stopped cold. This isn't... Melody stepped back. Farron Gerald, this is AJ Knight. His manners were the only thing that pulled his hand up to meet hers. Hi. Wide-eyed, Farron took his hand as she stared at him until he thought more than his tie must be crooked. What? Oh, Melody, you said he was hot. But wow, Farron said, arching her eyebrows for emphasis. Wow. AJ retrieved his hand and slipped back an inch at the passion in that statement. It must be the tie, he said, hoping that would throw her off and wishing his brain could think in a logical pattern. And funny, too, Farron said, although she didn't laugh. Melody, you are some matchmaker. When AJ looked at Melody, her smile said she already knew that. Come on, AJ, let's go see if you dance as good as you look, Farron said. Without waiting for him to accept, she grabbed his hand and headed for the dance floor. There was no getting out of this nightmare, so with a sigh, he allowed himself to be led like a prisoner to the guillotine. I had such a great time today, Dante said softly as they stood at her car next to the museum, which had been closed for hours by that point. Eve couldn't quite believe how serious he sounded, nor could she quite fathom the look in his eyes. How could he not see how extraordinarily bad they fit together? So, what do you say? Next week? My place? Dante asked, gazing at her as if she held all the secrets of the universe. Next, She ducked her head and fumbled for anything to keep her from having to say yes. Finally, she tossed her hair back from her face. Lisa and I are supposed to go shopping on Saturday. Baby stuff. True, she hadn't called Lisa, but as long as Lisa didn't know the whole story, she would agree without question. Friday, then, he said. Friday I'm helping my mom hang curtains in her living room. Again, not the whole truth, but her mother had asked for her help a month ago, and if she showed up and said she was ready, they could hang curtains. Oh, Dante said, and his gaze dropped from her face. Gently, he reached over and took her hand. I'd really like to see you again, Eve. I really like being with you. The pleading of his gaze tore her heart out. Well, maybe the next weekend, she said finally, hating herself for not just telling him no and being done with it. As much as she wanted to, her heart just wouldn't let her. "Okay," he said, brightening instantly. "The next weekend, then." His one hand slipped up to her shoulder, and he bent forward. She couldn't explain it, but every time his lips touched hers, her heart fell into her shoes. Why was she kissing him? Why was he kissing her? Why were they standing there together with nothing between them except his pity for her and her need to not reject his kindness? When he pulled back, that look was back in his eyes. "I can't wait." "Yeah," she said softly as he pulled her into his chest, and the "neither can I" got lost. "Watch this," Farron said as she set the full shot glass on her forehead. Its balance wavered precariously, and AJ fought not to rescue it before it splattered everywhere. Finally, she broke the pose, took the shot glass off her forehead, downed the shot in one gulp, and looked at AJ. "Your turn." "Oh no," he said instantly, backing away from the challenge. "I don't have that great a balance." "All the better," Farron said, grabbing for one of the full glasses on the table. She held it out to him. "Come on." "No, I don't think so," AJ said. "I'm driving." "Melody can drive," Farron said as she looked at Melody. "Can't you, Mel?" "Yeah," Melody said softly from where she sat on the other side of the table. "Sure, I can drive. Go ahead, AJ." One look at Melody's vanished smile told AJ that the evening was going as badly as he thought it was. "Come on, AJ Way-J, show me what you've got," Farron said, sliding closer to him and wrapping her vine-thin arm through his. Repulsion coiled around him. "I think it's about time for us to make tracks." "Make tracks?" Farron asked, backing up only slightly. "But it's early." "I've got work in the morning," he said, standing. Melody looked at him with wide-eyed shock as he pulled her to her feet. He looked back at the anaconda still slithering in her chair. "Take care, Farron." "Yeah," she said sullenly. "You too." Melody's eyes were the size of small tires as he pushed her ahead of him to the door. It wasn't until they were in the parking lot that she actually got words to connect with her tongue. "I cannot believe you just did that." "Me? Okay, let's talk disbelief here, Mel." They crossed the parking lot, waiting only for one passing car as it sped by them. "You set me up without even asking me, and then my date turns out to be Glenn Close's character from Fatal Attraction." "Farron's nice," Melody protested. At his car, he crawled into the driver's seat, hit the unlock button for her, and slammed his door. "I guess I'm going to have to take your word for that, because I certainly didn't see it." He started the car and backed out. They were in traffic before he looked at her again. "She's not my type, Mel." A pout crossed Melody's features. "Well, I'm beginning to think I don't know what your type is at all." "Yeah," he said, nodding seriously. "There's a good start." Bugs Bunny was racing across the screen when Eve pushed her eyelids open the next Saturday. She took one look at the television and closed her eyes in exhaustion. Vaguely, she remembered 2 a.m. 3 a.m. was clearer, and 4 o'clock was as clear as this moment. It was points after 5 that she faded out on again, and now here she was awake at 7 a.m., with no desire to ever wake up like this again. There were still mornings sparsely sprinkled across her life when she woke up that for a single moment she thought he was there with her. In some perverse way, she liked those mornings. She went to sleep hoping for them every night, because as bad as figuring out it was a dream was, those single moments were almost worth it. However, most mornings were like this, just misery. Hating Bug's chipper voice, she reached over and punched the remote, but she hit the channel button instead of power. "Only $100 down can get you in your new apartment. Furnished and unfurnished units are available. You can use your table or ours, but come on down and see us. We are conveniently located just minutes from the Galleria." Eve's eyes flipped open. "That's right. $100 can make the dream of having your own space or just a new place a reality? A new place. In a way, it sounded wonderful. In another, it sounded like death itself. A new place meant moving on, leaving the past behind, leaving Dustin behind. Her heart dropped at the thought. As long as she was in this place, there was that absurd thought that still said he might come home. That one morning, he would just walk back through that door again like nothing had ever happened. It seemed stupid, but her heart refused to see that. All it saw was that if she left, if she moved, he would have no way to find her if it had all been some horrible mistake on the part of the universe. She rolled over and fanned her hair out on the white pillow behind her. Without really thinking, her gaze traveled across the room to the off-white wall beyond. Prominently displayed in the center of that wall was the gold-framed picture of her in her wedding dress. Strange, she thought as she looked at it. There was no Dustin in that photo, just her and a black background. It was almost like a premonition of how her life would turn out. Just her alone, standing in a sea of blackness, smiling for all the world to see. What they couldn't see, what they could never even guess, was the number of tears behind that smile. Her mind drifted back to that awful week after she had picked up that phone and gotten that summons. Most of the ensuing week was a fog, but the bits and pieces she remembered stung her heart. Those around her probably thought she had been the Rock of Gibraltar. The truth was, it was all she could do to hold it together. It was as if she was but one small tremor away from total collapse from that moment to this. When she cried, she made sure no one was around. When she didn't, she wanted to. It wasn't that a piece of her had died. It was more that she herself had died in that fire. Heart and soul, she had died so that the only thing left was this body that had somehow not gotten the message. Slowly, her gaze slipped from the photo down the wall to the fragile pink crystal rose sitting on the table, and the fog broke. Pain seeped through her as her mind traced back to the moment she had first seen it. Her first birthday present, from him. She could still see his eyes shining in the knowledge that she was as in love with the present as she was with him. Her arms went around the pillow she held, and she crushed it to her chest, wishing it was him, but knowing it never would be again. "Don't miss out," the television announcer broke into her thoughts again. "Spaces are limited, and once they're gone, they're gone." Before sanity, or something like it, could retake control, Eve grabbed for the phone, wiped her eyes, and dialed the number on the screen. This has been White Knight, Book 2, The Courage Series, written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings.
Never miss a second of the story. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel today.